Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2019, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you. As part of the incredible large class of members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, I'm really proud to be here helping my colleagues translate a number of policy positions and issues in being able to translate that into action into various policies and to be able to express that. So this special order is very, very much an integral part of organizing within our caucus and the Congressional Progressive Caucus on what we call frontline community issues. And so I want to thank my colleagues for helping us organize today a special order hour to declare loudly and very clearly to every Muslim American and to Muslims around the world that the House of Representatives will not stand idly by as this administration continues to enforce its racist Muslim ban. So with that, I really rise today to send a message to marginalized communities everywhere that through our work to repeal the Muslim ban, we are preventing racist bans from ever happening again. I'm so incredibly grateful for Congresswoman Chu's leadership of the National Origin-Based Anti-Discrimination for Non-Immigrants Act, or what we call the No Ban Act. And I'm proud to yield to her as much time as she may consume. Thank you, Congresswoman Chu, for your leadership and for your courage to stand up against those that try to target folks based on their faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Congresswoman Tlaib, for putting this special order hour together. I truly appreciate it, especially during this very, very significant week. Monday marked the 3rd anniversary of the Muslim ban. And we had a press conference on that day. It was incredible to see the senators and the House members and so many groups of great diverse backgrounds all coming together to say, now is the time to pass H.R. 2214, the No Ban Act. The failure of this ban was apparent the day it began. I'll never forget that day in January of 2017, just 3 years ago, when Donald Trump announced his first Muslim ban, creating chaos and separating families with no justification. I was on my way to a community event when I received a frantic call about 50 Muslims who were being detained at LAX for hours with no end in sight, despite the fact that they had green cards and were legal. At that point, I decided to drop everything and help in any way I could. I rushed over to LAX to advocate for these people. And once I arrived, I found out that indeed, there were scores of people there with a legal right to be here, kept for hours with little food and blocked from receiving legal advice from an attorney. It was outrageous. And when I pressed Customs and Border Protection for answers, they resisted and blocked me. I even got them on the phone, only to have them hang up on me. I'd never been more disrespected as a member of Congress, but disrespect and chaos is what this Muslim ban is all about. And the pain and psychological trauma this travel ban has caused are long-lasting spouses and fiancés being separated. Weddings, funerals, and graduations have been missed. People have not been able to come and take care of sick ones. Over 5,000 adopted children of U.S. citizens cannot join their families. None of these people are threats to the U.S., and we have every way of knowing that through our extensive vetting process. But they've been made victims of this hateful ban nonetheless. And it just doesn't have to be this way. When the Supreme Court upheld the president's ability to issue these bans, the court also required the administration to grant waivers to ensure that the program had a legitimate national security interest. But despite that requirement, the State Department has approved only 10% of these applicants. That means that the Trump administration believes that 90% of all travelers from these countries are threats to our national security, and it renders this waiver process virtually non-existent. That is outrageous. That is why we have to fight back. That's why last spring I introduced the No Ban Act with Senator Chris Coons, which is the best way to reclaim Congress's power and stop this ban. First, it would repeal all three versions of President Trump's Muslim ban, putting an immediate end to this family separation. Second, it requires a report on the total number of waivers that were granted and the total number that were denied, so we know the truth about what's happening. And third, our bill says that if a president does want to implement such a ban in the future, they would actually have to produce actual evidence of a threat. This ensures that in the future, no individuals are denied entry into the U.S. based solely on their religion. With the president confirming that he now wants to expand this ban to even more countries, now is the time to act. The response to the No Ban Act has been tremendous. 214 members of Congress have co-sponsored the bill in the House, and over 480 groups have endorsed it. 39 members of the Senate are co-sponsors. And in September of 2019, the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees held a joint hearing that examined how few waivers have been granted to individuals since the ban was issued, even though most people applying for entry into the U.S. pose no threat to our country. Just this week, Chairman Nadler announced that the bill will be marked up in the Judiciary Committee in 2 weeks, and Speaker Pelosi announced that the No Ban Act will be brought to the floor for a vote. This vote cannot happen soon enough for people like Ismail Al-Ghazali, who will be my guest at the State of the Union next week. Ismail is a U.S. citizen who works at a small neighborhood market in New York, and in 2013, he married his wife, Hind, in Yemen. Hind applied for a visa to join her husband in the U.S., but before her interview at the U.S. Embassy in Djibouti, Trump's hateful Muslim ban went into effect. Hind was 8 months pregnant, and her pregnancy has been difficult. Doctors had discovered she had a heart condition. Ismail and Hind hoped that meant that they would be granted a waiver due to medical reasons. But after an interview that lasted just 5 minutes, Hind was denied a visa and left to give birth in Djibouti while Ismail had to return to the U.S. so that he was not able to witness the birth of his first child. Last year in April, Hind gave birth to another daughter, and Ismail has not been able to even meet his daughter for several months because of the ban. Luckily, however, the family has now been reunited in the United States, but too many others are left waiting for no reason other than the president's prejudice. We have every ability to vet people like Hind, as we have done for years. Leaving families divided by this ban is a choice. That is why we need the No Ban Act. It is essential that we take away the president's power to put prejudice into policy before more countries and more families are impacted by this hateful ban. Thank you to all my colleagues who are here tonight for their steadfast support of this bill. Thank you, Congressmember Tlaib, and I yield back.
Thank you. As one of its first acts, this White House decided to ban Muslims from entering the United States by issuing an executive order prohibiting the entry of nationals of certain Muslim-majority countries. The people that this administration banned are not all the same. They represent a diverse array of countries and cultures, including Arab communities, Black communities, Southeast Asian communities, among so many others. All around our nation, especially in Michigan's 13 districts strong, we understand just how dangerous this administration's racist Muslim ban is for our families. The Muslim ban fuels anti-Muslim violence and discrimination. It promotes the dangerous myth that Muslims are inherently foreign, violent, and pose a threat to the United States. The Muslim ban also harms children. In the 2 years since it went into effect, countless families have been needlessly separated. People have been denied access to life-saving medical treatments. Children have been denied their parents, access to their grandparents, and have been missing, family members have missed births, deaths, weddings, and funerals for loved ones. I rise today to say that Muslims and Muslim Americans are our friends, our neighbors, and our family members. And yes, they are also members of Congress. This White House might not like that fact very much, because the racist Muslim ban represents the federal government's endorsement of an anti-Muslim discrimination culture. The policy endorses a fear-mongering campaign that only serves to dehumanize and divide. And it leads us to question if this White House has any plans for our country that are not centered on hate or greed. I am extremely troubled that this federally sanctioned discrimination has contributed to a significant spike in hate crimes against American Muslims and attacks on mosques in Muslim communities all across the country. That's why, as members of Congress, we must put an end to discrimination by passing the No Ban Act. We have over 200 members of Congress who support and co-sponsor this No Ban Act. As introduced, the No Ban Act would immediately rescind the Muslim ban and stop discriminatory orders and abuses of authority by this administration, thanks to the leadership of Congresswoman Judy. By ending the Muslim ban, the No Ban Act will also get us close to ending this extreme number of increases of religious discrimination within our immigration system now. The bill will amend the Immigration and Nationality Act, INA, to prohibit discrimination on basis of religion and ensure that no president will ever again be able to ban an entire community without accountability. I urge my colleagues in the House leadership to bring the No Ban Act to the floor as soon as possible, because our communities cannot wait. Minority communities across our country and indeed the international community are eager for action that repeals the Muslim ban. As someone that is raising 2 Muslim boys in our country, I can tell you they struggle now, even sharing about their faith, and even worried about the rhetoric that they hear from various folks in school, but also just in passing, not only through social media, but through different kinds of conversations that they are hearing, where they talk about not only folks that are of a Muslim faith, but folks for various immigrant communities, and with their father being 2 sons of a father who is also an immigrant, they now really struggle very much in feeling that they can be open. And 9 years old, my son, who's now 14, remembers me. I remember speaking to his father about a terrible ad that was, or cartoon that was put in USA Today, where it depicted Muslims in a certain way that would evoke violence towards Muslim Americans. And I remember talking to his father at that moment and just kind of whispering to him, like, this is terrible. I can't believe they're doing this. This is just going to invoke people to really hate and even want to kill Muslims. And my son, who came into the room, to the bedroom, said, "Don't worry, Mama. If anybody asks if I'm Muslim, I will tell them that I'm not." That's the kind of culture that we create by allowing these kinds of discriminatory policies to be placed, and for us to allow it to be codified through executive orders and allow it to go without any action. You know, I ran a campaign to take on hate, which really started in Michigan, but was implemented throughout the country in about 12 communities. And one of the things that young people understand is, you know, you got to take on hate with action. And you can't sit idly back, because people just thought, well, this doesn't impact me. But really trying to understand that it does connect all of us, because this form of othering and the culture that you see within the administration is real, and it's dangerous. And sitting idly by and not doing anything about it, to me, will increase that form of hate towards people of different faiths. And trust me, it's not just about Muslims. It's about other kinds of different faiths, people of different ethnic backgrounds. This, in essence, is creating this kind of hate culture that we can't see not only in our American society, but it's also festering within our school culture and with our young people, again, questioning constantly with identity and allowing kind of to normalize this form of othering through acts like this executive order. You know, when you hear Muslim leaders and those talk about the separation that happens. I remember at Bridging Communities in Southwest Detroit, we had a press conference with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell fighting back against the separation of families. And it was all stemmed around, well, I didn't understand, there's supposed to have been a waiver. Well, you all should know many of the people that we represent that were coming to our offices were not granted waivers. And we're talking about people that are married, that have legal access through the immigration, but for the Muslim ban, are not able to reunify with their family members. I have 2 young children that can't see their father because of the Muslim ban. I have folks that had a green card, had access to the United States, but when this got implemented, because it was implemented in a way where there was no notice, no policy, no procedures, no structure in place for it to be for folks on the ground to understand what was going on. That's why we saw what we saw, the overwhelming call for action and people showing up for airports all across the country saying, no, not now, not never. And it's really important that we do it through action within the Congress. And I hope my colleagues understand this should be bipartisan support. This is religious discrimination. This is one of our core values as Americans. We're founded on religious freedom. And for us to allow, again, targeting of folks solely based on their faith, to me, repeats history. We've done it in the past, and it wasn't right then, and it isn't right now. And I think I could speak on behalf of Muslim Americans. They do not want to wait for an apology. Apology is not enough. They want action today. They know this is discriminatory. They know this is biased. They know this is targeting Muslims. And yes, it is leading to, again, increased hate crimes towards Muslims at a huge amount, percentages across the country. And so it is critical that we act, that we don't sit silently by, because doing nothing is not an option anymore. So I urge my House leadership to, again, to bring this No Ban Act forward to the floor as soon as possible. And I really commend the incredible leadership of many of our colleagues, especially my good colleague from Indiana, Congressman Andre Carson, who I lovingly call the Dean of the Muslim Caucus. But yes, we are your neighbors, we are your advocates, we are your doctors, your teachers and all those things, and also your members of Congress. And so again, it's really critically important that we push back against this No Ban Act. With that, I would love to recognize my good colleague, Congressman Carson.
Thank you, Congresswoman Rashida, for your leadership, for your friendship, for all that you do, not for just your constituents, but for Muslims, non-Muslims, and Americans. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the No Ban Act, which was a great opportunity for me to be a co-author, and I urge Congress to swiftly pass this legislation. Madam Speaker, in the 3 years since President Trump implemented his Muslim ban, its dangerous impact is clearer than ever. Families remain torn apart. America is less respected around the world, and our country isn't any safer. But for this president and for all of those who crafted this ban, this policy was never about national security. Since his first day in office, he has worked to advance a dangerous white nationalist agenda, and the Muslim ban is its cornerstone. It's no surprise then that he may be planning to expand this ban to even more countries, many in Africa, which he has previously described in some of the most vulgar and offensive ways. As a Muslim and as a black man, it pains me to witness this low moment in our country. It's not the only time America has shut its doors to people in need simply because of their race, ethnicity, and nationality. But thankfully, we can make it the last time. Madam Speaker, that's why it's so important that we pass the No Ban Act to end the Muslim ban and make sure history no longer repeats itself in this way. Our legislation has more than 200 co-sponsors in the House and the endorsement of nearly 400 diverse civil rights, faith, national security, and community organizations. Americans of all backgrounds are behind this great bill and are demanding Congress to pass it, to take a bold stand against bigotry. So I'm extremely pleased that the No Ban Act is expected to be taken up by the Judiciary Committee next month. You know, as my colleague, Congresswoman Tlaib, said, and I want to reaffirm, Muslims are part of what makes this country great. Muslims have been a part of this country since the inception of what we now know to be America. Ever since those West African slaves were brought here to America, Muslims have contributed to our great country. Go to any major courtroom, you'll find a Muslim lawyer, maybe a judge. Go to any major hospital in this great country, and you'll find a Muslim physician. There are Muslim engineers, Muslim scientists, Muslim educators, Muslim politicians. You have 3 in Congress. We'll see more in the future, God willing. I urge my colleagues and all Americans who believe in equality for all people to support the No Ban Act. Together, we will get it passed and begin a new chapter in our country's history. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
Great time. Thank you so much to my colleague from Indiana. I really appreciate the incredible public service that not only stemmed here, but also, as you all know, many of our servicemen and women who are of Muslim faith are serving our country every single day. And again, people need to not try to separate us as not being part of this amazing country. And the Muslim ban completely just tears that down and comes from, again, a place of hate that we need to push back against. With that, I want to really honor and respect the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, my good colleague. You're one of the fighters within this chamber every single day for communities of color, marginalized communities, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.
Representative Tlaib, thank you so much for your incredible leadership. It has been so wonderful working with you, not just here in this body, in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which I'm proud to co-chair, but for years we've known each other and worked together, and it's wonderful to have you here. And to talk about this issue and your leadership on this issue, but really the kind of leadership that America needs to show by passing the No Ban Act. It was 3 years ago, I had just been elected to Congress, was within my first weeks here, that Donald Trump issued his first Muslim ban. And when that happened, I thought back to after 9/11. That's actually when I started becoming very involved in politics as an activist. And we faced some similar situations of Muslims, Arab Americans, and others being targeted simply for their religion, their ethnicity, their place of origin. And so I knew, the good news is I knew what to do, which is that I immediately rushed to the airport. That Muslim ban created irreparable harm on Muslim families here at home, but also around the world. We've had generals in our military testify that we desperately need to have our allies, and that some of those allies are, in fact, Muslims who help us in other countries. When I heard the news and I rushed to SeaTac Airport, I saw absolute chaos. Chaos that was caused by an administration that put forward a Muslim ban with no preparation, no notification, no planning at all for the kind of harm, irreparable harm, that would be caused for American citizens, for lawful residents, and for international visitors. Today, families remain separated from their loved ones. American businesses and research institutions, and I have many of those research institutions in my district and many American businesses in my district, who are not able to recruit the best minds from abroad. And our nation's doors are closed to people seeking safety from violence, war, and persecution. But it wasn't just then. The chaos has not stopped. Earlier this month, up to 200 Iranian Americans, almost all of the ones that we know of, U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, green card holders, were unjustly detained at the U.S.-Canada border in my own state of Washington. In the days after the Muslim ban, I had introduced the Access to Counsel Act, an act that once again was so important as we watched these detentions of Iranian Americans who, by the way, travel across the border regularly. In fact, some of them travel across the border so much that they have expedited processing. What that means is you go through additional security screening so that you can get a card that you hold up at the northern border as you cross the border. You don't need anything else other than that expedited screening, that extra security screening, in order to cross the border. But that day, we believe over 200 Iranian Americans were stopped at the border, U.S. citizens, legal green card holders, simply because they were of Iranian descent. The Access to Counsel Act, which we hope to mark up and bring to the floor at the same time as the No Ban Act, just says that if you are here as a U.S. citizen, a legal permanent resident, or have any legal status, and you are put through this unjust secondary screening, that at least you can have access to counsel. Not counsel paid for by the government, but just counsel provided either through your own pocket or through nonprofits that provide that service, because people are being deported in an expedited manner. And in fact, that is what happened in Seattle 3 years ago when I rushed to the airport when the Muslim ban was first introduced. We actually were able to, at the airport, get a temporary injunction from a judge that allowed us to essentially go and stop a plane on the tarmac that was ready to take off with some people who should not have been deported. We were able to stop that plane from taking off thanks to the courts and incredible speed of attorneys, nonprofit organizations that came together and filed for a temporary injunction. That allowed us to stop the plane and to stop people from actually being deported. It is not right that we are seeing U.S. citizens detained by CBP for up to 9 hours without a chance to speak to a lawyer simply because they weren't born here, even though they're United States citizens. It is not right that students with visas have increasingly been rejected at our airports and deported without a chance to speak to a lawyer. When people have legal status in the United States, it is not right that they are subjected to a second loyalty test simply because of their religion or their place of birth or their ethnicity. Madam Speaker, I am one of only 14 immigrants in the United States Congress out of 535 naturalized citizens who have the great honor and privilege of being a United States citizen. I don't want us to think that we have separate loyalty tests that we have to go through. We have examples of that. The Japanese internment, 123,000 Americans of Japanese ancestry who were put into internment camps simply for being Japanese American. The reality is we need the No Ban Act to repeal President Trump's Muslim ban and stop any future president from implementing future discriminatory bans. And I'm very grateful to my colleague, Congressmember Judy Chu, chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, for introducing and championing this critical bill to send an important message, to our Muslim brothers and sisters, both here and abroad, that America believes in religious liberty and we remain committed to welcoming people regardless of their faith, regardless of the country in which they were born. In recent weeks, we have heard that an expanded Muslim ban may be coming from the Trump administration this week. Let me be very clear. Each iteration of these bans send a terrible message to Muslims, to those who are targeted, that our foundational value of freedom, of religion, does not apply to them. An expanded Muslim ban will only worsen our relationships with countries around the world, and it will not make our country safer. It will harm refugees. It will isolate us from our allies, and it will give extremists propaganda for recruitment. It will be a different Muslim ban pushed by the same xenophobic administration, and it will have the same negative ramifications as past versions of the Muslim ban. Madam Speaker, I just had the opportunity to come back from a CODEL to Sudan with a number of our members, Republican and Democrat. And this is a country that is transitioning from a 30-year dictatorship to a democracy, a civilian-led government. And that was powered by a people's revolution in the streets that inspired us here in the United States and around the world. People who sat and peacefully protested a brutal dictatorship. Over 200 people who were shot and killed in those peaceful protests on June 3rd. And Madam Speaker, Sudan has been supposedly added to this next round of countries that may be added to the Muslim ban. And the people of Sudan said to us, Republican and Democratic representatives of the United States government, they said, doesn't America believe in democracy, in transition? Why would Sudan, a people's revolution that led to a democratic government through the overthrow of a dictator for the last 30 years that has been in power, why would Sudan be on a list of countries that have these restrictions and are part of this ban? That sends the total wrong message. As the Vice Chair of the Judiciary Committee, Subcommittee on Immigration and Citizenship, I will do everything in my power to resist the Muslim ban and demand liberty and justice for all, without any caveats. We must pass the No Ban Act to end not just the Muslim ban, but other anti-immigrant policies pushed by this administration. But most importantly, we must pass the No Ban Act to remind ourselves again of who we are as a country that has welcomed people from all over the world, including myself. Came here as a 16-year-old with nothing in my pockets and by myself. And to now be standing here in the United States Congress, my responsibility, our responsibility as a body, is to preserve those foundational values of freedom and justice and religious tolerance. And so I look forward to passing the No Ban Act. I thank you, Representative Tlaib, for your friendship, for your leadership, and for all that you do to advance justice. And on behalf of the Progressive Caucus, 100 members strong, we are so proud to have you in it. Thank you.
No. Thank you so much. Your incredible leadership and mentorship is so inspiring, but also completely fuels my commitment to be centered around social justice and equality. So thank you so much. I wanted to make sure that we talk about the fact that because of the Muslim ban and some of these kind of hate agenda policies that we see coming out of the administration, that all of it has resulted in an increase of hate crimes that still has not been underreported and has not, I think, truly under this administration been documented by the FBI. Even when the current president just called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States, just days after that report, hate crimes against Muslims and Arabs nationwide spiked up to 23%. And then as we hear about the various kinds of hate crimes, we get some of these complaints and incidents being reported to even our offices. I wanted to make sure that we talk about the fact that the FBI, when it released its report this past year, that Muslim advocates in their statement, which is very accurate based on what we hear of our community members at home, said that yet again, that the FBI annual statistics on hate crimes show us that the worrying number of Muslims, Jews, Sikhs, Latinos, and other crimes are being victimized by hate crimes are not being reported, or the data does not reflect that it's not a complete, accurate picture of the epidemic of hate that continues to threaten the safety of so many of Americans across the country. Last year, an armed man drove a truck into a convenience store in Louisiana because he suspected the owners were Muslims. Also, in March of last year, a man deliberately tried to drive his car into a Muslim family in a parking lot in California and managed to strike the father twice. Though both are clear examples of hate crime, neither of those were included in the FBI's 2018 data on hate crimes. It's completely unacceptable. And as we push for the Muslim Ban Act, I really want to try to also encourage my colleagues to really try to have hearings and discuss the importance of accurate data around hate crimes increasing in the country. And that's why we have to pass the Khalid Jabara and Heather Heyer No Hate Act to improve the hate crime reporting data collection. Many of the organizations that support the No Ban Act also want to see a much better reflection of the data being reported by the FBI around hate crime. The only way we're able to promote or push back against these forms of hate that lead to violence and even death for so many folks that are impacted by these forms of racist policies and hateful agenda policies is to be able to document and to push back against it. And so I really appreciate a number of my colleagues, over the 200 members that support the No Ban Act, and look forward to finally being able to vote for it on the floor. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time. And Madam Speaker, I do move that the House does now adjourn.
Judge Gentilady will suspend.
Yep.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan rise?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Today, the U.S.